We understand now that the federal government's borrowing from the Central Bank of Nigeria has in recent years ballooned by 19.26 trillion naira in 7 years. That's over 25 times higher than what it was like in 2015. What's the implication of this on the economy?
You see, the World Bank has warned Nigeria repeatedly to stop taking loans from the CBN. This idea of taking loans from the CBN is called ways and means, but is actually a strategy by the government to along the line of deficit financing. What the CBN Act says, the CBN Act does not criminalize lending money to the government. The CBN is the lender of last resort. So across the world, the Apex Bank lends money to government. But the CBN Act says that what you are lending should not exceed 5% of your revenue for the previous year. We've seen a situation in which we took a loan from the CBN that amounted to 80%. So how do you simply gloss over this? The real reason for this whole thing is the fact that revenue is stagnant. We have a country currently where the debt to revenue ratio is negative. When people talk about debt to GDP ratio, I always tell them that, look, you should be talking about debt to revenue, because it is your revenue, your capacity to bring in revenue that will justify this borrowing, this reckless borrowing that we are seeing. But a situation in which you keep borrowing from the CBN, and even debt repayment, despite the fact that the loans taken from CBN attract 7% interest rate per annum. What we paid back still accounted for 20% of our total debt repayment stock for the previous year. That should tell you that a lot of the debt that we pay back are actually even from the CBN. We can't continue to use the CBN to help us clear our fiscal mess. The CBN has to assert its independence by following its rules. And it is clear in its rule books that what it is lending to government must not exceed 5% of the total revenue of the government for the previous year. But even that one is constantly being brushed aside. At the time this government came in, that was in 1999, debt to the CBN, debt owed the CBN was just a little over 600, I think 648 billion. Today, that was in 2015 when this government came in 2015. Debts to the CBN by the federal government amounted to 648.26 billion. By the December of that year, it had jumped to 856.33 billion naira. Today, it stands at 19.26 trillion. So from 648 billion naira that it inherited, debt holds the CBN in 7 years has climbed up to 19.26 trillion. 19.26 trillion from 648 billion. So you can see that we've been taking loans from the CPN, from the Apex Bank. There are implications for this. All of these loans, all of this injection of capital into the economy that is not based on any form of productivity. Economists warn that they have the capacity to worsen the inflationary rate. They can also cause the value of our currency to go down. That's the reason the World Bank keeps telling us, look, stop these loans that you are taking from the CBN and then calling it ways and means. We are paying salaries with loans that we take from the CBN. We have now reached a point in which, as a country, debt repayment is higher than the revenue that is coming to government. So it means that ultimately we could even find ourselves, because you must pay these debts. These are statutory, the payment of these debts are statutory. So it means that we'll get to a point when we could even be taking loans to pay our debts. We are in a serious financial, economic problem. We are reluctant to admit it. We see people trying to justify borrowing money up and there and saying as long as it is tied to infrastructure and all that, but we're already borrowing more than necessary. If your capacity to pay back is under threat because because your revenue is lower than what you are spending on debt servicing, then it's something to be worried about. So people saying, oh, that because we are building infrastructure here and there, then it is justified to continue to take loans. They don't know, they don't realize that for every loan that you take, you've got to pay back. And these loans are largely denominated in foreign currency. So it's like we are postponing the evil day. The economy is on a cliff. We've got to do our best to improve production in our country so that we can earn more foreign exchange. We've got to do our best to expand the tax base so that FRS and the rest of them can earn more revenue that will enable us to take care of our needs, including but not limited to infrastructure development. We can't continue to take loans at the rate we are going, including even the loans we are taking from the CBN. So the World Bank that is warning us that we shouldn't be funding our fiscal deficit with these loans from the CBN, they know what they are talking about. You've got to stop. In 7 years, this debt that we are owing the CBN rose from 648 billion to 19.26 trillion. Something is wrong. Something is really wrong. Something is really wrong. Even the loans, even the debt that we owe Nigerian banks.
Yeah.
In the last few years, the debt that we owe Nigerian banks have also gone up. Instead of addressing the big problem of revenue stagnation, we think that the solution is to simply be borrowing money up and down. We've got to find a way to generate more revenue. When we generate more revenue, we won't be borrowing money the way we are borrowing money. We'll be able to use what is generated for infrastructure, for other needs. We can't continue to spend, to use loans to pay salaries of workers and all that. And the government is reluctant to trim its recurrent expenditure. Recurrent expenditure is too big because there are too many areas of waste that we have refused to address. A country like Senegal decided that it did not need a bicameral legislature. They decided to scrap their Senate. We are not prepared to do anything close to that here. We see governors flying private jets all over the place to attend meaningless meetings in Abuja. All of these things put so much strain on the budget. And the money that we are talking about, the loans that we are taking from the CBN, are out of our budgetary spendings. We can't come up with budgets every year, budgets that are failing, and then believe that the solution is simply to be borrowing money up and down like somebody possessed. No, it has to stop.